The morning of September 10th, 2025, began with the kind of crisp, clear Utah air that makes the mountains of Orem look painted against the sky. At Utah Valley University, UVU, the atmosphere was anything but serene. The campus was humming with the arrival of Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA, who was bringing his American comeback tour to the heart of the university. For weeks, the event had been the talk of the student body, a polarizing, high-stakes debate set in the open-air fountain courtyard. By noon, an estimated 3,000 people had filled the amphitheater-style space, creating a dense sea of faces, flags, and recording devices. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Charlie Kirk sat at a simple table, a microphone in hand, doing what he had done 100 times before, fielding questions from a line of students. He was in the middle of a sentence, leaning into the mic to address a student's point about mass shootings, when the reality of his topic collided with his life. Roughly 175 yards away, a different kind of preparation was reaching its peak. High above the courtyard, on the architectural ridge of a campus building, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson lay in a prone position. He wasn't a student, he was a hunter. He had chosen a vantage point that gave him an unobstructed line of sight to the podium. Next to him was a Mauser Model 98, a bolt-action rifle chambered in .30-06. It was a rugged, reliable weapon, a grandfather's gift that had been intended for the quiet woods of the American West, not a bustling university campus. Robinson's eye was pressed against a $2,000 high-performance scope. Through the crosshairs, the vibrant chaos of the courtyard was reduced to a singular, stationary target. He had been planning this for over a week, a fact later confirmed by his own digital confessions. He had even taken the time to engrave his bullets with political slogans and memes, turning his ammunition into tiny, lethal manifestos. At 12:23 p.m., as Kirk tilted his head to listen to a student, Robinson adjusted for the slight breeze and squeezed the trigger. The sound that followed was a sharp, dry crack that echoed off the glass-paneled buildings. It was a singular sound, not the rapid-fire rattle of an automatic weapon, but the heavy, definitive thump of a high-caliber rifle. The impact was instantaneous and horrific. The .30-06 round, designed to take down elk and deer, struck Kirk in the neck. The force was so immense that witnesses described his head bobbing or tilting sharply to the right as he was thrown back in his chair. A fountain of blood erupted, coating the white tablecloth and the nearby equipment in a deep, visceral crimson. For a fragment of a second, the crowd was paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of what they were seeing. Then, the silence was shattered by a collective, guttural scream. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The 3,000 people in the courtyard didn't know where the shot had come from. They didn't know if there was one shooter or 10. The psychology of the crowd shifted from debate to Darwinian survival. Thousands of people dropped to the concrete at once. One witness later told police, "I remember thinking I could not get low enough. I was on the ground wondering when the bullet was going to hit my back." The sound of crying and the frantic shuffling of feet replaced the political discourse. Among the thousands of terrified onlookers was a family member of a high-ranking prosecutor from the Utah County Attorney's Office. This individual was standing a mere 85 feet from the podium when Kirk was hit. The trauma of the moment was so overwhelming that they fled in a blind panic, leaving their backpack behind in the blood-stained courtyard. This backpack, containing personal items and identification, would later be tagged as evidence by the very office that family members' relative helped lead, a detail that would eventually threaten the entire legal foundation of the case. While the crowd suffered on the ground, Tyler Robinson was already in motion. He didn't stay to witness the aftermath. He retracted the bolt, jumped from the rooftop, a feat captured by a distant security camera, and vanished into the campus's wooded perimeter. He moved with a chilling level of composure, discarding his black t-shirt and hiding the rifle wrapped in a towel in a thicket of bushes. He hoped the absence of a serial number on the vintage weapon would keep him anonymous, unaware that the trail he was leaving was already glowing red on the digital map. The initial law enforcement response was a frantic scramble of misinformation. Within minutes of the 12:23 p.m. shot, UVU issued an emergency alert: active shooter, run, hide, fight. The university went into a total lockdown. Thousands of students were trapped in windowless classrooms, barricading doors with desks, their hands shaking as they texted, "I love you," to parents who were seeing the news break on national television. The chaos extended to the highest levels of government. Just hours after the shooting, the FBI director made a premature announcement that a suspect was in custody. It was a false start that gave the public a fleeting sense of relief before the grim truth emerged. The killer was still out there. The manhunt that followed would involve local, state, and federal agencies, but the real breakthrough wouldn't come from a tactical team or a forensic lab. It would come from a living room 260 miles away. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Amber Jones Robinson, Tyler's mother, was sitting in her home in Washington, Utah, staring at the television, when the news displayed a grainy, low-resolution image of a young man in a black t-shirt jumping from a roof. She felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. She recognized the gait. She recognized the curve of the shoulders. She looked at her husband, Matt, and voiced the unthinkable. "That looks like Tyler." Matt Robinson's heart sank for a different reason. He had recently given his son a .30-06 rifle, the same caliber the news was reporting had been used in the assassination. They tried to call their son, but Tyler was evasive. He claimed he was homesick, lying in bed, even as his phone pings were placing him in Orem. The Robinson family, devout members of their community, were suddenly faced with a choice that would destroy their lives: protect their eldest son or uphold the law. As the sun began to set on the first day of the post-Kirk era, the FBI released more footage. The video showed the shooter low-crawling across the roof into a prone position, displaying the cold, calculated patience of a trained marksman. The nation was gripped by a mixture of grief and fury, with political figures across the spectrum calling for justice. But as the manhunt expanded to the borders of the state, the killer was sitting in his car, typing out a message to his partner that would serve as his own death warrant. While the authorities were searching the woods near UVU for a lone wolf terrorist, Tyler Robinson was staring at his grandfather's rifle, realizing he had left his DNA on the trigger, and his father was on the other end of the phone, demanding to know where the gun was. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. While the world outside Utah Valley University was paralyzed by the image of Charlie Kirk's slumped form, the man responsible was navigating a silent exit. Tyler Robinson did not flee with the adrenaline of a chaotic shooter. He moved with the clinical detachment of someone who had practiced his escape. CCTV footage, later analyzed frame by frame by the FBI, showed him reappearing on camera at 11:50 a.m. He was a shadow in a black t-shirt with a centered American flag, hidden behind large sunglasses and a dark cap. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a student running late for a lecture. But in his hand, he held a phone that was already transmitting the first ripples of a confession. On September 11, 2025, the investigation shifted from the physical courtyard to the digital ether. Tyler's romantic partner and roommate became the unwitting repository for a series of chilling admissions. "I had enough of his hatred," Robinson texted. "Some hate can't be negotiated out." These weren't just the vents of a frustrated student. They were the cold justifications of a 22-year-old who had spent weeks engraving political slogans onto .30-06 casings. He spoke of the scope he had mounted on his grandfather's Mauser, a $2,000 piece of glass that had turned a political debate into a target-rich environment. The motive was a jagged glass shards of modern American polarization. In the year leading up to the shooting, Tyler had drifted far into the waters of radical left-wing ideology, specifically focusing on trans rights and anti-fascist rhetoric. This put him on a collision course with his own father, a die-hard MAGA supporter who viewed Charlie Kirk as a hero. The Robinson household in Washington, Utah, had become a pressure cooker of ideological resentment. When Tyler learned that Kirk was bringing his American comeback tour to UVU, he didn't see a speaker. He saw a target for the rage he felt toward his own father's world. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The manhunt ended not with a tactical breach, but with a mother's intuition. Amber Robinson had seen the video of a man jumping from the Losi Center roof. She didn't see a terrorist. She saw the familiar gait of her son. The Mauser Model 98 was missing from the gun cabinet. The realization was a slow-motion car crash. Tyler's father, Matt, realized the unique rifle he had gifted his son was likely the weapon used to kill a man he admired. The family didn't wait for the FBI to knock. They convinced Tyler to surrender to a neighbor who worked for the sheriff's office. When Tyler was taken into custody, the public expected a manifesto. What they got instead were text messages about engraved bullets and a mundane worry about losing his grandfather's gun. He had left the rifle wrapped in a towel in a bush, a discarded scepter of a Kingslayer, hoping the lack of a serial number would keep the trail cold. He had even joked about Bulge UW memes, a dark, internet-poisoned humor that contrasted sharply with the fountain of blood he had left behind. As he was transported to the Utah County Jail, Robinson remained calm, almost serene. He believed he had achieved something. But as he sat in that cell, the legal system was preparing a response that would bypass the political debate entirely. The prosecution didn't just want a conviction. They wanted the ultimate penalty. They alleged that Robinson hadn't just committed murder. He had committed an act of political terrorism that put thousands at risk. The state's intent was clear: the death penalty. But even as the paperwork was being filed, a human error was being made within the prosecutor's office. A senior member of the team had been receiving real-time texts from a family member who was nearly killed in the courtyard, a detail that would soon threaten to light the entire prosecution on fire. As the prosecution filed its intent to seek death just days after the arrest, Tyler's defense team discovered a secret group chat, one that suggested the very people trying him were the ones who had a personal axe to grind. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. In late 2025, the legal chess match shifted into a realm of deep ethical controversy. Tyler Robinson's defense team, led by a group of highly specialized capital defense attorneys, unsealed a 48-page motion that sent shockwaves through the Utah legal community. The motion didn't argue about the shooting. It argued about the shooter's prosecutors. They claimed that the Utah County Attorney's Office was infected by a conflict of interest that made a fair trial impossible. The core of the conflict was a family group chat. A high-ranking member of the prosecution team, someone with supervisory authority over the entire case, had a family member who was an eyewitness to the murder. At 12:23 and 30 seconds p.m., the moment the shot was fired, this family member was standing less than 100 feet from the podium. As the crowd dropped to the ground in terror, this individual was frantically texting the family group, which included the senior prosecutor. Someone got shot. The first text arrived at 12:25 p.m. "I'm okay. Everyone is going inside," followed at 12:26 p.m. "Charlie got shot." The confirmation came seconds later. The prosecutor wasn't just reading a police report. They were reliving the trauma through their child's eyes. The defense argued that this prosecutor had discussed the exchange and the potential conflict with the entire team, including County Attorney Jeffrey Gray, before any disclosure was made to the defense. There was no screening protocol, no ethical wall built to protect Robinson's right to a disinterested prosecution. The defense's argument was visceral. How can a father or mother objectively decide to seek the death penalty against a man who almost killed their own child? For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The 48-page document also revealed a haunting physical detail. The prosecutor's family member had fled the scene so quickly they left their backpack behind. This backpack was then collected as evidence, tagged by the very office that family member's relative was supervising. The prosecution was, quite literally, processing their own family's trauma as state evidence. The defense argued this personal family interest materially limited the state's ability to represent the people of Utah ethically. In court on December 11, 2025, Tyler Robinson made his first in-person appearance. The security was unprecedented. Streets around the Provo courthouse were blocked off. SWAT members in camouflage fatigues lined the walls. Tyler sat in a button-up shirt and tie, appearing calm, while his mother wiped away tears in the front row. The tension in the room wasn't just about the murder. It was about the integrity of the system itself. The defense further alleged that the speed at which the death penalty was sought, filed immediately with the charges rather than after the customary 60-day window, was proof of an emotional response rather than a legal one. They argued that the prosecution was serving two masters, the law and their own personal desire for vengeance. Judge Tony Graff, a man described as a reasonable jurist who wanted to ensure a fair trial, was forced to weigh the public's perception of justice. If the public believed the prosecutors were personally biased, any verdict, guilty or not, would be viewed as illegitimate. The case was no longer just about a sniper on a roof. It was about the very soul of the American legal system and whether it could remain blind when its own officers were the ones bleeding. While the judge mulled over the disqualification of the entire office, a new set of handwritten witness statements emerged, describing the horror of those who weren't hit by the bullet, but were shattered by the sound of it. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. As the trial moves toward a pivotal hearing on January 16, 2026, the focus has shifted to the aggravating factors that make this a capital case. In Utah, murder is only a death penalty offense if specific criteria are met. The state is betting everything on the great risk of death to others factor. They argue that by firing a .30-06 round, a bullet designed to travel through thick muscle and bone, into a crowd of 3,000, Robinson turned the entire courtyard into a potential graveyard. The defense, however, is presenting a different narrative. They point to the fact that Robinson fired only once. He was surgical, they argue, not a spree killer. They claim the prosecution is using the collective trauma of the crowd to manufacture an aggravating factor that doesn't exist. They've released handwritten statements from witnesses to show that the terror was psychological, not physical. One student wrote about being on the ground wondering when the bullet was going to hit my back, while others described panic attacks in lockdown classrooms. The defense's argument is cold. Trauma is not the same as a great risk of death. The January 16th hearing will be the moment of truth. If Judge Graff disqualifies the Utah County Attorney's Office, the case will be handed to a special prosecutor, likely delaying the trial for years. This would be a massive blow to the Kirk family and the MAGA movement, which has viewed the prosecution as a test of the state's resolve against political violence. Conversely, if the motion is denied, the defense will almost certainly appeal, potentially dragging the case into the higher courts before a single juror is even seated. Adding to the complexity is the double-edged sword of publicity. The defense has successfully limited the media's ability to show Tyler in shackles, arguing that such images prejudice a future jury. Yet, the internet is flooded with conspiracy theories. Figures like Candace Owens have suggested, without evidence, that Robinson didn't act alone, while Kirk's widow, Erica, has taken over Turning Point USA and is fighting to keep news cameras in the courtroom. She wants the world to see the face of the man who took her husband. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. As it stands, Tyler Robinson sits in the Utah County Jail, his life dependent on the definitions of bias and conflict. He remains a figure of intense fascination. A young man who crossed a railing on a walkway at 12:15 p.m., crawled into a shooting position, and changed the trajectory of American politics in less than 10 minutes. The story of the UVU shooting is a story of a nation in pieces. It is a story of a son who hated his father's politics so much he killed the man who represented them. It is a story of a prosecutor who couldn't separate his job from his child's fear. And most of all, it is the story of Charlie Kirk, who went to a college campus to prove me wrong, and ended up proving that in 2025, the most dangerous place in America is the middle of a political debate. And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, empathy, and respect for those who can no longer speak for themselves. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts below. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.